If you're constantly tense and holding your breath and breathing exercises don't seem to be working for you, it's not your fault. Chronic breath holding runs deeper than your lungs. It's rooted in your autonomic nervous system and gets trapped in your throat and in your core. And if you don't break free from it, it'll feel like your body is a prison. So we're going to explore why that happens and what you can do in today's video. But before we do, if you're looking for a practitioner that can help you with bioenergetics, breath work, and breaking free from physical tension, then you might want to work with me, your old Uncle E. And you can actually come here and work with me for a half a day where I'll teach you bioenergetics and we'll do all the exercises together and give you a plan that you can take home and continue to grow. So click the link down below. It has everything you need to know. So we got a question today. It comes from a bro. He goes on to say, yo, Elliot, so I've been struggling with chronic breath holding. I'm not sure how long I've been doing it, but I've been aware of it for a while now. I believe it started from anxiety, but I literally do it all day throughout the day, constantly. He says, even when I'm relaxed, it causes me some really weird symptoms. The only time I don't hold my breath is when I'm concentrating on breathing consciously. As soon as I engage in my work or whatever task is in front of me, I return to the chronic breath holding. Please, can you help? Thank you, bro. Yeah, great question. And yeah, of course, I can help. I've had the same experience myself. I recognized many years ago that when I sat down to work at the computer, in particular, writing on the computer, I would hold my breath. And so today I'm going to talk to you about a simple hack that I use in order to eliminate that. But I want to talk to you first about why that happens and the anatomy and physiology around this breath holding so you have a better idea of why this weird little exercise or this weird little hack, really, it's not even an exercise that I'm going to show you, eliminates this problem completely, like overnight, instantly, like right away. So the very first thing that you got to understand is that the body is made up of an inner unit and an outer unit, according to Alexander Lowen. He didn't make this up, but it's where I heard it first. When we're being formed in the utero, in your mom's womb, the very first part of you that starts to grow is the brain, the spinal cord, and the stomach. And everything else starts to grow around that. So the most primordial part of our being, the oldest part of our being, the part of our being that is also present in reptilian animals, like all animals. We have, in fact, a reptilian nervous system, reptilian branch of the nervous system, which includes our brainstem, right? People will talk about this. Is the oldest part of your brain grows first. This is important. I'll tell you why in a moment. But then out of that starts growing your organs, right? So your liver and your lungs and your stomach, all the other organs start growing around that tube. So if you imagine it's the brain, just the brain, two brains, right? Almost like a dumbbell, right? Two brains and a tube, and then everything starts knitting itself around it. And the last thing to develop, right? Just imagine it's like layers growing, is the muscular system, right? And so the inner unit is what's happening on the inside, right? Your alimentary canal, which is your throat right down to your anus, right? To your butthole, from the rooter to the tutor. But very close to that, esophagus and whatnot, is like the spinal cord, right? So it's like the spinal cord's here, and right outside of it started growing your esophagus and your digestive system, right? So they're really knitted very closely together. The more inner the unit, the closer it is to your spinal cord and your brain and your belly, right? The more it's under the control of your involuntary nervous system. The more it comes to the outer part of our layers of our being, the more it's under control of our voluntary nervous system. So what does that mean? Involuntary means you're not like doing it. For example, like what's on the inside here, your heart. You're not like beating your heart. Now you could have some conscious control over your heart, but you're not like beating your heart right now. Like I'm not consciously beating my heart. You're not digesting your food, right? You're not breathing, like respiration happens without your conscious control. But on the outside here, these muscles, these are under my conscious control. These are my voluntary muscles because I voluntarily use them. Now, what does this all have to do with you holding your breath in that unconscious way? Like you say, he says, I'm doing it constantly and it happens when you're not even thinking about it. And the only way to break free from it is when you are consciously breathing. And I mentioned just a moment that breathing or respiration is happening involuntarily, unconsciously. And you know this is true because when you go to sleep, you don't have the same problems, do you? You're not holding your breath when you sleep, unless you have sleep apnea, and that's a totally different problem. But what I'm saying is you don't have to make yourself breathe when you're sleeping. When you just shut off, you could literally shut off your brain and still breathe. That's why like people who are, catatonic, people who've lost brain control, they can still breathe a lot of times, right? Depends on the damage. They can still breathe because it's under the control of your involuntary nervous system, the inner unit, the inner tube, if you will, the inner tube. This is all so important. Just follow along. So breathing, though, is sort of a weird thing. In the same way, and even in a more profound way, that you can control your heartbeat, you can control your breathing. Of course, we know this. That's why breath work is so important. Breath work is possible. We can hold our breath. We're just not breathing. We can breathe faster if we choose to breathe. So our breathing is like the linchpin between your unconscious and your conscious. It's that profound. In fact, when in the Bible it says that God formed man, the first thing he did was breathed into his lungs. That was the difference between God being and human being, was breath. Boom. Spiritus Sanctus is Holy Spirit. Spiritus is also the word for breathing. Pneumatics, pneumonia is also a word for spirit. Spirit and breathing, consciousness and breathing go hand in hand. I know I'm going down a rabbit hole right now, but one last thing. When you hold your breath and you pass out, you don't necessarily die. You lose consciousness. So breath is consciousness. Breath is spirit. And it's, like I said, it's the linchpin between the involuntary, which is totally under the control of God, if you will. You're not beating your heart, God is. And your conscious or your voluntary nervous system, right? Because I can hold my breath. So that puts breathing in a very special category. Now, when you find yourself holding your breath, you got to understand that the inner unit or the deep nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, the vagus nerve, which runs right close to the spinal cord, right along the alimentary canal, it's very primal, it's very old, and as a result, it has animal-like behavior and responds to threats, responds to trauma in a way that is, immature, involuntary, primordial, right? It's instinctual, right? As opposed to these muscles out here, which are more under the control of the cortex, right? The cortex brain rather than the neocortex brain rather than the medulla oblongata and the spinal cord and the vagus nerve, which are more like the reptilian brain. I hope you're following me here. So what that means is that inner unit, that inner part of the autonomic nervous system is where all your fears are trapped. Fear is like our oldest emotion. Fear is trapped in there. Fear runs deep. And so when you catch yourself not breathing, it's an unconscious reaction to unresolved fear. The reptilian brain can respond to fear. Like, I have alligators in my lake in the backyard, and an alligator will respond to fear. but it only has a reptilian brain. It doesn't have a mammalian and a neo-mammalian brain. So it can respond to fear, but it can't respond to love. An alligator doesn't love. It'll eat its own children. But if there's under a threat, it knows how to thrash and save itself. So that reptilian, that deep reptilian instinct that's still within you is responding to a fear that your mammalian and then of course higher brain, neo-mammalian brain may not be aware of at all. I mean, it could be like unconscious fears that were passed on in utero from your mother. We know this is true based on attachment theory, polyvagal theory. We call these all theories because when you're dealing with the soul, it gets a little weird. And mirror neurons and epigenetics. We know this is true, that you can carry with you shit that happened to your mama. I mean, think about it. You were her body. You were literally her body, in her body, right? You were one with her. So all I'm saying is, just because you're not actively afraid of something doesn't mean that you're not responding in a fearful way. And holding your breath is a fear response. Okay? So we just need to be aware of that. So what do? Well, it's a beautiful thing. This inner unit, this is totally my theory. It doesn't mean that it's untrue, because you'll see that it works, but I just never heard it anywhere before. You could go look it up and maybe you'll find it, ask ChatGPT. But I discovered this myself. The inner unit is modulated in many instances and can be controlled by diaphragms. And we have 3 main diaphragms in our inner tube, all of which we have a little bit more conscious control over. The first diaphragm is the throat. Oh. The way I'm able to make those sounds is by controlling my diaphragm. Throat. So there's a diaphragm, there's like a drum diaphragm, right? Like a sheet of muscle with a slight hole in it that I can control. Whoa, whoa, whoa. It can close down my esophagus, my trachea, or open it based on, so it's open there, open, closed. You see, I can do that. We also have the second diaphragm, which is they call it our solar plexus. Interestingly enough, because the reason why it's called the solar plexus, well, number one is because it's at our center of our being, right? Like the sun is at the center of our solar system. But more interestingly is because there are just hundreds of nerves, I don't know the exact number, that branch out from it to make it look like a sun. Your solar plexus, that tells you the importance of your solar plexus, your diaphragm. I'm using the term solar plexus because I'm using diaphragm to describe all 3. But we have our diaphragm here, right? Here, from the rib cage, right? That synthesis right here, right across. If you track along your rib cage all the way around the back, it's huge. And we can control that. If you breathe into your belly, it's because your diaphragm is dropping. My belly's doing this. You can do breath of fire. And the belly is coming in and out because that diaphragm's doing this. And then we have the pelvic floor, right? This is all really important. Follow me. The pelvic floor, which is like when I say breathing to your balls, that's really what I mean. Breathe so deep that you're passing through this diaphragm, the belly diaphragm, right? Your chest diaphragm, right down into your perineum, right? Between your perineums, between your balls and your anus. You have a pelvic floor. It looks like a diaphragm. If you pull up an anatomy chart and you look down cross-sectionally and you look down, it looks like a basin. It's even often referred to as your pelvic basin. And you can control your pelvic basin. You know how you know that you can control your pelvic basin? Because if you got to poop, what do? You hold it in. You pull up your anus so the poop doesn't come out. Or women, for example, they have a wider fossa hole in their pelvic floor. And so women will often, because that muscle gets weak after childbirth or just being out of shape, they'll pee themselves more regularly, right? They'll do jumping jacks and pee. My wife, when she sneezes, sometimes she has to hold herself, right? She puts her hands down there, right? Because she doesn't want to pee herself. But if the pelvic floor is contracted, the pee won't come out as easily. Now, we don't pee ourselves so easily because we got a urethra, we're a longer one, we got a penis, right? So, but anyway, the point is you can control that. You can control that and there are exercises called Kegel exercises that you can strengthen your pelvic floor, which does wonders for a lot of different things. Now, we know that we can control these three diaphragms. All three diaphragms are associated with breathing. Breathing is associated with, well, vibration, or sound is associated with vibration because these things vibrate. They vibrate. It's vibrating here, right? All three of them, they're moving, right? They're moving. They can be moving when I talk. They tense or whatever. Anyway, let me get to the point. Let me give you the goods right now. So 15 minutes in, 16 minutes in. Here's what you need to do. I've discovered that by relaxing the throat diaphragm, all other diaphragms follow suit and relax automatically. I don't know why or how this happens, but by relaxing the throat, you relax your solar plexus and pelvic floor, thus making breathing so much easier. Like, you don't have to think about it at all. And there's no obstruction. When you hold your breath, there's obstruction. You're obstructing your breathing by tightening up in here and pulling your belly in. Notice the involuntary tension when you're holding your breath. You're holding it in here, back here, right? Through here, and you're probably holding your belly tight. Right? Involuntary and also voluntary, because you can control those, right? It's the linchpin. Breathing's the linchpin. So what do? Check it out, bro. When you find yourself chronically holding your breath while you're doing an exercise, while you're doing something, like writing on the computer, and you simply open your mouth and breathe through your throat, mouth breathe, you're opening this, you're relaxing this diaphragm, and breath almost like, if you can imagine when you're breathing through your nose or you're keeping your mouth closed, you're breathing through a tube. And the tube is constricted, so it's difficult, so you have to work for it. But then when you open your throat, the whole inner tube and the muscles around it open up and turn it into a wind tunnel. Making breathing so much more relaxed, so much easier to do. It's almost impossible to hold your breath with your mouth open. Try to hold your breath with your mouth open. You could even open your nasal passage. I like to do that too. So I open all inside here. You'd be surprised at how much muscle that gets tense. All that is muscle. Like anywhere you get muscle that gets tight, those muscles in the back there, they get tight too. Look what happens when I relax it. It's tight. Watch. I'm gonna do tight first and then relax. Oh, I can't even do it. Under my control, but it's not. All right, I'm being silly. Notice my nose, when it goes up, my nose opens too. Those muscles, you can control them, right? And they can also, if they're not under your conscious control, grow tense with fear. So you literally are choking yourself off from breathing. When you open your mouth, it stays open like a wind tube. And if you imagine you have a tube from your throat right down to your pelvic floor, all 3 diaphragms will open up. So if I relax my belly and breathe right down into my perineum with my mouth open, and I like to stick my tongue out because I'm tongue-tied, believe it or not, right? So my tongue gets in the way. That's why when they say when you are doing CPR with somebody, you want to get the tongue out the way. The tongue could choke you. You could choke on your tongue. So if you stick out your tongue, less choking, especially if you have a big tied tongue like I do. And then notice if I try to breathe through my nose, there's constriction. So what am I saying? I'm not saying don't breathe through your nose, because breathing through your nose stimulates the parasympathetic branch of your autonomic nervous system, which helps you relax. But if you find that you're tense, or you find that you unconsciously hold your breath when you're doing certain exercises, certain things, start doing it with your mouth open. Like today, I was tense today. For what reason? I don't know. So I did my laps around my lake with my dogs the whole time with my mouth open. Because I can't hold my breath with my mouth open. So the hack is to open your mouth. And by, all the muscles back here are going to actually relax. Your solar plexus will relax. Your breathing will be more relaxed. And you'll have a hack, a trick that you can do if you're not relaxed, which is opening your throat. Now, one last thing, I would invite you to set aside practice time during the day where you actually lay on your back and breathe with your mouth open. Because like anything that you do an exercise with, it will then carry over more readily into the other things that you do throughout the day. And when you find that you're tense or you're feeling stressed out or you're just holding your breath unconsciously, you'll just do this. And you'll find that you feel a heck of a lot better, dude. Hope that helps. Done.